Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I'm joined by Heather Milsted, whose production Period Dramas is coming to the Other Palace on Sunday, the 27th of February. Two shows, 2:30 and 5 p.m. Heather, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you start by please introducing yourself and tell me a little bit about Period Dramas, the show?
Hi everyone, I'm Heather. I'm an actor, writer and producer. I have written Period Dramas, which is a show all about the history of menstruation. It's a sort of comedic cabaret piece. I'm a queer and neurodiverse actor mostly. I did a lot of spoken word, and then I sort of moved into cabaret, and from there I've written some sort of longer form plays and cabaret pieces as such. So Period Dramas is all about the practicalities of dealing with your periods. I wanted to really show how people actually dealt with their periods in history.
And where did the inspiration come for the piece?
So I actually started thinking about the idea for the show when I was studying history at undergraduate level. So that must have been like 5 years ago. I was having a joke conversation with my friend because I'd always thought that period dramas were about periods. Like as a kid, I loved them, and I was like, but why aren't they about, like, I just didn't understand. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we just did a TV series and did like Pride and Prejudice, but everyone just bled. So it was sort of a joke conversation. We're like, oh, we'd call it period dramas. That never happened. But I then, flash forwards a few years, ended up at drama school, and we had the opportunity to sort of do a personal research piece. And I was like, oh, I'd love to play with this idea. And kind of at the same time, I just moved to London. I'd got really into the cabaret scene and drag stuff. And I just found this fusion of bits that all came together. And I started by creating one of the acts, which is now still in the piece, which is an Elizabethan drag act, based on this rumour that Elizabeth I actually died when she was 10 and was replaced by this boy called the Boy of Bisley. And that sort of piece started the whole show. And it became an act based with each act. It's like a different period in time. And
how do you kind of then go about making such a, I mean, it's probably like obviously it's an everyday topic for ladies kind of thing, but how do you go about approaching that to make it kind of comedic?
Well, it's interesting because I think I hate my periods, but I also find it hilarious. Like the funniest things happen around it with hindsight. And I think throughout history, you've got the same sort of interaction with it. It's the comedy, I guess, mostly comes from the way that people feel and think and talk about them, and this taboo. I've kind of used the taboo to center the comedy. It's like, people thought this about periods. They thought that you could make people fall in love with you or cure leprosy and do all of this stuff. How stupid is that? And then today, we're afraid of them. Why don't we talk about them? How stupid is that? Like, it's kind of taking the piss out of the taboo in a sense, so that we can celebrate ourselves and realize, like, this is just silly. Like, this is a thing that happens to over 50% of the population, and we need to talk about it because there's a lot of problems with that as well.
Yeah, of course. You kind of how the website obviously describes it cabaret, comedy, and tap. Yeah. So how are you kind of blending those styles together?
Absolutely. That came probably from my love of tap dancing initially. What I've done is each act is a different cabaret act. So I have a tap dancing act and a bit of tap listed about. What I did is I started with the research. So I started with, I sort of did an overview of the history of periods, and when I found interesting bits, I dove into a bit of a hole there. And the form came from the history. So the Victorian act I've got is a burlesque piece, sort of playing on this idea of this Victorian morality, like you can't show your ankles, you can't do any of this. That's where that form came from. And my medieval one is a magic act, because there was all of this European association with witchcraft. And the 1920s was just an era of sort of Charleston and tap dancing. And so my 20th century up until the late 19th century, early 20th century is sort of my tap dancing period. I did a bit of a tap through the ages.
Kind of did any of that personal experience that you've kind of lived through yourself kind of come into the writing?
Absolutely. there's also this MC character, which is essentially a version of myself that introduces each act and reflects on it, because I also want to engage with some of the myths that people talk about and be like, oh, I don't know if you've ever seen Horrible Histories, but it's a bit like the rat in Horrible Histories, being like, this bit's true, this bit's not. And that is also a moment where I share a lot of my own experiences and try and just open up with the audience. I think I want it to be a piece that emphasizes that we all just need to embrace ourselves and be like, and I have a lot of stories, so a lot of those do come into the piece. Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of like, as you say, it's obviously based on history. How much of it is kind of the truth, and then how much is obviously to make it kind of comedy, kind of how much you kind of like have to blend it, I suppose?
So it's completely rooted in the facts that are out there. Not everything is in it, of course, and there are some bits which I do talk about, but then afterwards I'll be like, well, that was a myth. They thought they like there's a myth that the ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks and the Romans, that they used tampons, but actually we don't know that. We know that they used things similar for other things, like for illnesses or to cure things, but we actually have no evidence that they used that. But I will cover that in the show, so I'll be like, actually, bit of a myth that. But it is pretty much very factual, and then I have picked the bits that sort of fit with the show as such, which is a shame in some respects, because I definitely want to write a book to go alongside it with all of the bits that didn't make it into the show. But it very much starts with the facts first and the history first. I'm a massive nerd. And
there you go. That's the next step, you see. That's where you have to take it next, you see. Expand up, you see.
Absolutely.
What kind of would you say then you want audiences to take away? Because I guess, like, obviously if like a female audience might obviously engage more with it, but obviously I suppose you don't just want females to come. I suppose you want kind of everyone to come.
Everyone. Yeah, definitely. So I think for people who bleed that come into the show, I want them to try and feel less ashamed, if shame is something that they associate with that. I know that, I mean, I talk about periods all the time. I've written a show about it, but there are still parts of it which I touch upon in the show that I feel so ashamed of, and I still get like, I can't talk about certain bits, or I still feel embarrassed when things happen. And it's like, actually, we don't need to feel that. I want it to feel very like celebratory, like, yeah, humans are messy, but it's okay. Basically. So I want definitely people who experience periods to feel that. But I think it's so important that the audience is diverse, because that's the whole problem in the first place, that we don't talk about it, that I mean, sex education in school and PSE lessons are changing finally, but they've still got quite a long way to go in that sense. And I think it's really important for guys to kind of see the gory bits and the funny bits and all aspects of it too. And I think looking at it through history helps in a sense. And it's like, all these people have thought these things, we think this, why? Like, I want people to go away and be like, let's just celebrate ourselves and talk about stuff, because that will solve so many problems. And
what would you say, I mean, without giving too much away, has been kind of the more fascinating things that you've learned kind of while you were researching?
That's so interesting. I think the ancient Egyptian part of the show was really interesting, because there are certain periods in time where the historical record is just really hard to find out the information. There just isn't much out there, which was something I experienced quite a lot. There was, especially when starting out, there's like the odd book, but it's just not talked about. And that was one of the frustrations that led me to want to make this piece in the first place. But when it came to the ancient Egyptians, which is the oldest period that I look at, there was so much stuff. They've got this, one of the first gynecological papyruses, known to the ancient Egyptian world, has so much cool stuff, and they're just not afraid to talk about their bodies and certain parts of their bodies and what they do with them in a way that you don't necessarily see later on as we get closer to now. And I found that so cool. There was so much I could learn.
And I suppose, like, you don't really think about it, like, you must, like you say, you don't really think about historical side, I suppose, because you know, like, to think about it now, you don't like think, you must think that it's not, they didn't have that problem back then, do you? Kind of like, whereas, like, obviously they're the same bodies as kind of we've got now, so it's kind of obviously then you're bringing the show. Go on.
No, you go. After you.
I was going to say, obviously you're bringing the show to the other palace, which is exciting anyway, but obviously this is after you kind of had the vaults cancel. So how kind of how excited are you that the show is still getting to go on, basically?
So excited.
Yeah.
I think this show's been cancelled 4 times now.
Blimey.
It was meant to happen in June and then in August in 2020 when COVID all happened. But it's been great in a way because it's evolved. The ancient Egyptian act didn't exist in 2020 and we have that now. So it's definitely changed over the years, but I'm so excited that it finally gets to go ahead. It's been a bit of a roller coaster the last few years, so I can't wait to actually make it happen, and it's so soon now.
Yeah, and I guess like, especially with the unusual thing, like where you've written a show, but then you've suddenly got 2 years where you kind of, I can't really do it. Like, I suppose that's unusual because then, like you say, you've got time to expand it, grow it. But I suppose then you're still not getting that part where you obviously performing it makes it naturally evolve, doesn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there were definitely moments when I fell out of love with it during the lockdown period, because it is a one-woman show and that can be a bit frustrating. But it's so nice now to be in the room with the director, with the movement director, and just be able to play with it and see where it goes, because that's been a long time coming. So
glorious. I have 5. I call them quickfire, but it's obviously up to you how quick you want to answer them. Questions. These are more about just you generally, more about the show. So first one is, what was the first piece of theatre that you can remember seeing?
Love Song, Frantic Assembly. I think we went on a school trip, but it was the first piece of theatre I saw. Musicals was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang when I was about
classic.
7.
I have a Chitty poster there.
Amazing.
Classic. Yeah, that's one of my first to be fair as well. So kind of similar times. But what would be, say, your favourite piece of theatre that you've seen in your lifetime?
Oh my goodness, my favourite piece of theatre. This is recent and it's maybe not my favourite, but the first one I thought of was Ocean at the End of the Lane. I saw recently, and I just thought the stagecraft was amazing. I felt like I was in another world, so I'm going to go with that for now. 10 minutes later I'll be like, there's so many others, but
that's probably, it depends on what you've seen recently, like. I saw Curious Instant last Monday. Amazing. Never seen it before, and it kind of like mind blowing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be theatre related or career wise. What would you just generally one thing on your bucket list you want to do in your lifetime?
I want to climb a mountain. That's my New Year's resolution this year, is to just climb a mountain.
A big one, like a big one, or like
a big one. Yeah, I'm going to start with Ben Nevis and then see where we go.
Yeah, I've done Snowdon, but we did it on the train, so that's cheating because you can go up, you can go up on that train. And it was all foggy at the top anyway, so it wasn't worth it.
No.
So I don't recommend Snowdon. But what would you, if you could have dinner with 3 guests, dead or alive, who are you going to invite?
Tricky one. Charles II, because I just think such a cool period of history. I'm obsessed with the Stuarts. I would also have maybe I'd probably have Alan Rickman, because I just love Alan Rickman. And maybe Stephen Hawking. I just think that would be a fascinating conversation. This changes every time I'm asked this question. Of course, there's too many people. Of
course, always. And the last quickfire one, what would be, say, the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
What's meant for you won't pass by you. So one of my friends' grandparents used to say that to them, and I think I am naturally a stressor, and it's really like, it makes you think, do you know what, it's basically what will be, it's all going to be okay, you've got to go with the flow, which my friends watching this will laugh because I am the biggest stress head, but I think that is a great piece of it. And also a Disney quote, which is have courage and be kind. Those are the only 2 things you really need.
Brilliant. My final question for you today is the simple one for you. Why should audiences come and see the show?
Because it is going to be chaotic, messy, hopefully funny, and hopefully you'll learn loads about the history of menstruation, and we'll all be able to bust open this menstrual taboo, why is it still here?
Well, that wraps it up. Brilliant. Thank you for your time today. Good luck with the show. It's going to be amazing. It sounds brilliant. So like you say, it sounds like you say, horrible history is kind of like that sort of style genre, which is always brilliant. So everyone should go get tickets for Sunday 27th February for the Other Palace, 2:30 and 5 p.m. Heather, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.